Hey, friends, welcome to Holy Ourselves, a podcast about becoming more authentic in our faith, especially in relationship to our sexuality and our gender. No pretending, no fixing, just figuring out what it means to be whole before God, others, and ourselves in the midst of this crazy world. My name is Josh, and welcome to my new podcast journey. Many of you probably have found your way here through my podcasting ventures in the past, including Life on Side B, and my newest series, Becoming Whole, that aired earlier this year. And if you found this podcast and this is literally your first time ever hearing my voice, welcome. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. I am sure of that, but I'm glad you found your way here. I was thinking about how this is not my first time podcasting. And I'm here in my office, which surprisingly, if you're watching this on YouTube, and you just decide you want to watch me talk to a camera, I did not really coordinate for my shirt to match the walls, but this is the newly decorated office in my home, and love, yellow obviously is a color I'm embracing lately, as you can tell. But, when I started podcasting with Life on Side B, I had no idea what I was doing. Not that I necessarily know everything that I'm doing right now, but I really didn't know anything that I was doing back then. And just literally bought a mic off the internet that connected to my computer and got on Zoom and talked to Meg bots, and then 6 years of Life on Side B happened. And it's always was a running joke that there were sound qualities with Life on Side B. It wasn't just a joke. It was the reality. We always knew there was going to be something that happened with an episode of Life on Side B. It was inevitable. Some area was going to go wrong. But my goal for the production quality of this podcast is to be extremely elevated compared to previous podcasts and projects. I feel like if you listened to Becoming Whole, the series I put out earlier this year, I feel like I was very proud of that. I was, and you might disagree, and that's totally fine. You are okay to be wrong. No, I'm joking. But I was very proud of how that one turned out. And whereas that one was, there was obviously the interview with Sarah Claire that took up the main core of the whole entire series, but it was much more edited. This is not going to be that, which I'm going to get into what this looks like. So, but I want to first acknowledge that this is the first time ever that I am recording an episode where it is literally just me talking to you all without a guest, without a co-host. So this is very much new territory for myself. This won't be the only format of this podcast. I'm going to have guests on. You're going to hear familiar voices if you heard other projects that I've engaged in, and new voices. And but I wanted to start by speaking directly to you all to share about what this whole thing is going to be. Because I was thinking about how, I had no idea. Every project I've ever done, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, which is kind of fun. That's kind of the fun part of it, is you have no idea what in the world you are getting yourself into. So I wanted to be able to take this opportunity to speak with you all directly and kind of lay the groundwork, because there's going to be continuations of other things that you've heard from me, and there's going to be new aspects to this. So what is the behind, what's going on behind this whole thing of Holy Ourselves? Why Holy Ourselves? When Life on Side B was my first podcast ever, as I mentioned, I really wanted it to be a place of honest, practical conversations among Side B LGBT Christians. How do they live out their faith in a more authentic way, away from the need to placate or censor to outside audiences? And if you're not familiar with the sides language, Side A, Side B is language within the LGBT same-sex directed community, about beliefs around sex and whether God reserves sex for opposite sex marriage, and which is the belief in side B, and the belief that God blesses same sex sexual relationships, which is the core belief of side A. So my original podcast focused solely into the side B experience. And a lot of it was figuring out, your identity, your beliefs, around sexual ethics. And that's all a critical part of the journey. But if we stop there, I really believe that we're missing a critical piece. I believe that there is a lot more that's going on, which is kind of why I started getting into spiritual formation. This is something that's so true of all LGBT people. We are pressed by those around us to figure out, how do we identify? And what do you believe about sex? What do you believe about sexual ethics? And again, really important things, but we can't just stop there. I see this happen across the spectrum. It's not an uncommon narrative. You see a queer Christian, they come to terms with their queerness and start coming out more publicly. Great, amazing. That is like a really great step. And then they figure out what they believe about sexual ethics, whether they become convicted that God blesses same-sex sexual relationships, or they remain convicted that sex is reserved for opposite sex marriage. Cool. Regardless of where they come down on the issue, I have become very convinced that sometimes we use our convictions on this front to protect against deeper spiritual formation, because there's a lot more below the surface. And I believe we can hide behind the liberation of one, or the kind of like protection of another, just kind of the grounding in whatever we hold. And I want to say here that I'm not saying conversations around sexual ethics are not important. If you notice, we never really got into the theology of it all in Life on Side B either. That was intentional, because we wanted to get into the practicality of it. Like, cool, if you're convinced of this. And I think that was why I appreciated that a lot of, side A people would even listen to it for themselves. And I think that that's kind of the area that I really want to focus in here, that this is not simply about the lives of side B Christians, this podcast, Holy Ourselves. I believe that the journey of queer Christians is more complex than the side A and B. And I feel like there were times, again, it was a necessary part of life on side B, but I feel like a hindrance that came out of the necessary aspect of life on side B was that queer Christians who maybe didn't have it all figured out, who maybe were struggling in different ways, didn't feel like they could lean in and participate. And so my desire with this podcast is that we can meet each other where we are on the journey, wherever you are, that this is a place for you. This is a place for you to ask questions. This is a place for you to dig deeper into formation, because this is something I say to a lot of my directees. So if you're a directee of mine and you're listening, you might know what I'm about to say, though there's a lot of things I say in spiritual direction. But anyway, I believe one of the core promises of Scripture is that if you seek Christ, you will find Christ. And as a spiritual director, I can't really control what that looks like in someone's life. That's not going to always look like how it looked in my life. And even within the areas that I hold to be true, that there's complexity, that we are all in different parts of this journey. And so I want us to be able to meet here in our journey and find a way forward towards Christ. Because I believe if our aim is Christ, if what we are looking towards is God's grace, God's love, the gospel of Jesus, his teachings, that is what we will find. And we can't always control the journey to get there, but God does promise the destination. And this podcast isn't just for LGBT people. I also want to make that clear. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but this podcast is for everyone. So with that, I also kind of want to take a little bit of time to introduce you to me, because like I said, most of you probably have already heard about me, and it's not that I need to talk about myself so much, but I have learned from my years of podcasting that I don't control when people come into the conversation. So if you just happen to be someone this is your first exposure to me, I think it's important to give you a short clarification of me and who I am. If I get those bio things out of the way, I am from Florida. Have lived most of my life here. And I have my doctorate in ministry, doctor of ministry, and in the weird way that we call them a demon. Yes. And it's such a irony every time I say that I have a demon. I got it from Kairos University, and my thesis was actually Becoming Whole, the miniseries that that you may have listened to before. And if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's actually really great. I'm proud of it. A lot of people don't know what to do with the fact that my thesis, my dissertation, is a podcast. There was a written portion, which I think is in the show notes of all of the episodes. I know it is in the show notes of all of the episodes, but that was my dissertation, focused in on the intersection of spiritual formation for LGBT people specifically. And that's been a lot of my work, is the intersection of sexual wholeness, spiritual formation over the last 8 years. I've worked in different spaces of, inclusion for LGBT people within the church, training pastors. I worked at Posture Shift Ministries, which is an amazing resource. And I have worked with in the Side B community, obviously a lot in different aspects. And I just have a really deep passion for helping people see that our faith is not separate from our sexuality, that your sexual story, whatever it looks like, God desires for you to bring it to him, that God desires for there to be connection between them, that we don't have to compartmentalize these two areas of our life, which I think is often what we are told, is that if your story is not perfect, if the way you're going about it is not perfect, you need to shut up until you get it figured out, and then you can bring it to God. And I just believe that is completely antithetical to anything that actually forms us more healthy into the image of Christ. I believe authenticity, honesty, rawness is the way forward, is the way towards formation. And that is actually what Jesus teaches us. And yes, I do want to acknowledge, I do hold to a side B ethic, meaning I do live out my own sexuality from this perspective that sex is reserved for opposite sex marriage. And if you are listening and that is not your belief, that might create hesitation for you to listen. And that's totally understandable. I can't deny that impacts the way I engage in all conversations. It's a part of me, and it's a part of how I live out my life. But I hope you'll listen, even if there's hesitation for you. I invite you to reflect what that hesitation is. My goal here is not to make people stop having sex. That's like, I have a lot more important goals than that in my life. My desire, again, as I said before, is for all of us to see Christ, all of us to go forward more in wholeness, in integration, in what it means to be image bearers of God. And so, but I like to acknowledge that it's a part of my life, and it's probably going to come up. And that doesn't mean, I really don't want like conversations to feel like, oh, here's the side A view and here's the side B view, or any of that. I don't know. I hold in this tension that I believe the conversations around theology are really important, but I also don't think that they are, I believe that there's deeper conversations for us to have around formation, as I said, that we can all have together in that way as Christians, not even just LGBT people, but Christians in general. And so, as I said before, this podcast is called Holy Ourselves. It's the name of my practice. And so for this episode, I was trying to figure out, what do we talk about for the first episode, especially what can I talk about for 30 minutes? I mean, gosh, how far are we? We're already at 15 minutes. See, I can talk. You know what? I only got to talk 15 more minutes, because that is one distinction. Another distinction of previous podcasting endeavors to this one. These are going to be shorter. Who knows? I might say that and then that doesn't happen, but I want to try doing shorter content. Can we give really deep conversations and not do an hour? Gosh, there were some episodes of Life on ZB that were like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And that's just because we all like to talk. And who knows, if I get some of the old co-hosts on here, we probably will talk for that long. But anyway, going back to the thing, I was thinking about what to talk about in this first episode, and I was kind of leaning on wholeness as really the main area. Why is this practice called Holy Ourselves? What do I mean, by wholeness? Why is that the name of the show? Beyond just because it's the name of the podcast. And so I think, what is wholeness? I really think it's important to understand that wholeness is not the same as perfection. And it's not the same as completion. I see wholeness as integration. It radically changed my view of scripture when I realized that the word perfect is not how God describes his creation. He describes it as good. And that is a really important distinction, because I think what we have been trained, especially within sexuality, especially within sex and our attractions and desires and gender and all these things, that we have to be perfect in order to present ourselves to God. I don't care if you believe that, you've ever consciously said that was the thing, but I believe most of us, if you've spent time in the church, honestly, if you've spent time in culture, that has been something you've internalized in some way, probably. But rather than that, I think wholeness is showing up with everything that we have. On the flip side, so if wholeness is this showing up, it's this formation, it's the bringing together of ourselves before God and allowing God to see all of it, that ultimately means that we are fractured beings. I like to use the word fragmentation as kind of a defining understanding of sin. And sin is a whole other conversation. But when I talk about fragmentation, this crazy world we live in, it breaks us apart. It tears us apart. It tears us apart, families apart, countries apart, communities apart, everything. And I believe that's what the Bible, and not even just I believe, that is what scripture is talking about when it talks about all of these corruptions and ways that we are not living out what it means to be image bearers of God, that through the hurting of each other and the striving and all of those things actually fracture our very souls. And so then things that were once good, things that had once really good aims, are now going in a very different direction with the purpose of trying to help us. I think even go down to our own desires. Often, even our deepest desires are even when it seems like they are going way off course, they are trying to help us, but the fragmented, history that we have gone through, like the fragmented parts that have broken apart each time we have stumbled along the journey, has veered them off course. And God desires for us to bring all of these things together. You've probably heard this example before. I feel like it's been used so much in Christianity, which is why I hate to use it, but I'm going to use it. But for a while, Christians, pastors would always talk about the Japanese art of kintsugi, of, a broken vase that is brought together by gold, and then it's made into a new piece, really beautiful. And, as overused as that analogy can be, I do think it's really a great idea of this wholeness, that the wholeness is taking these parts that feel like they're never going to fit together again and allowing this process to happen of bringing them all together. Because we all have areas of our lives that we think, that one's too far gone. That one, I can't, no one needs to see that. And that's not how Jesus talks about the gospel. Jesus doesn't talk about sweep these things under the rug. He actually says it's, it's the fragmentation of this world. It's the corruption of this world. It's the craziness of this entire world that makes us hide parts of ourselves in darkness. And John 3, the Psalms, so often it's this kind of idea of God saying, let me see it all. Turn the lights on and let's see what is going on down here. because that's what God ultimately wants to do. He's not looking for us to fix things so that then we can be, brought before him. He wants to sit in the pieces with us. He wants to mourn with us. He wants to see what we can do with these pieces and bring them together. And we're going to be talking about this with so many different topics. Like I said, we are not going to be only talking about LGBT experiences, but it's my experience. It's a lot of my specialization. So that is going to be a major area and it's going to be covered a lot. But I really, really want to emphasize that this podcast is not simply for LGBT people. And if you're straight and you're listening, I really hope your main goal is not just simply, how do I love LGBT people? But if you want that, that's awesome. I want to remind everyone, all of us, each one of us has a sexual story. You are a sexual being, each of you. And I think especially, obviously, we as LGBT people know it very well because it's just such a forefront thing. We can't really escape. Our sexuality is there if we're going to have any understanding of authenticity in our lives. But there are many ways that the normalization and just the generalization of the straight experience makes us separate our sexuality from the rest of our lives. And we actually don't even sometimes see. When I do direction with straight people, now that I've been doing it more than I ever did before, it's actually been really enlightening for me to realize there's so many commonalities between our stories. I just think that straight people are not forced to deal with the really difficult parts of their stories at the same level as LGBT people are, because the ways of coping, the ways of hiding are so embraced in our culture that you can hide behind your marriage. You can hide behind your kids. You can hide behind the ways you live out your masculinity or your femininity or your gender in whatever way. And you can hide behind those things. You can hide by disassociating from your emotions. You can hide by overattach. All of these different areas, you can hide in them and never have to deal with the fears and the secrets that really lay deep in your soul related to who you are in your gender, in your desires, in your attractions. You never want to talk about it. And I think that is the distinction between that and the LGBT experience, where ultimately LGBT people, if they're gonna remain in the closet, that's gonna be a really detrimental thing after a while. I mean, it's detrimental for the entire time, but especially after a while, it really cripples people because it just it creates this major burden that is unable to be processed unless we can choose authenticity. So there's a little bit less choice on the side of LGBT people, but we have our own ways of denying ourselves authenticity in other ways, which we'll talk about more. But we all have a sexual story. I really want to emphasize that. If you are listening and you're like, I'm not queer, I'm not gay, I'm not bi, whatever, you're still a sexual being. And you still have a sexual story. You still probably have stories in your life about that really formed your desires, not just for in the bedroom, but the way you see yourself, the way you think about your own dignity when it comes to sexuality and what it means to be a man or a woman or whatever gender, and your attractions to the opposite sex. There are stories that really tell deep truths that maybe you've not really addressed before. Maybe you are learning it and you don't even know what to do with it. So all of that to say, this is a journey for all of us. And I want to address topics that are going to hit for all of us. So we're going to talk about masculinity, femininity. We're going to talk about internal family systems. Y'all, I mean, if you can't tell, internal family systems is also like embedded in a lot of what I've already talked about today, but I really want to dive in more to that. We're going to talk about this whole idea of victimization mentality. We're going to talk about like how do we deal, how do we move forward, how do we live more authentically, how do we invite God in our community, how do we live in community? Those are the kinds of things I want to talk about in this first season. So we're going to have some really cool guests on. It's going to be really, really, really exciting. Can't wait to share with you guys some of those guests that are coming up. And, if you're listening this podcast, if you're looking for how do I grow deeper, how do I have more wholeness in my life, feel like my convictions, my sexuality, my attractions, my dignity are just kind of all falling in line, this podcast is for you. If you're a spiritual director, a pastor, wanting to know how to walk with people in their sexual stories, this podcast is for you. There will be a lot more emphasis on LGBT, spiritual formation, just because I feel like there's really nothing there. And I think straight people in your sexual stories, you can learn a lot, even when we just talk about LGBT experiences for your own story. So there's that. I really want this podcast to be for everyone, even when we're talking about really nuanced, really specific topics. And so I really hope you continue to listen. I hope you push the subscribe button wherever you're listening, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever. Also, now that Life on Side B is done, the Life on Side B Patreon page has closed, and we're starting afresh with a Holy Ourselves Patreon page, which will really help just build this out into a really impactful resource creation tool for people, for you and for others. And so if you're interested in more benefits, right now I've created a bunch of different tiers of support. Later on, I plan to maybe have ads on these episodes. So whenever that happens, if that happens, you'll be able to get episodes ad-free by subscribing to the Patreon page, no matter the tier. And right now I'm starting with one bonus episode a month. That might be me talking more deeply about some of these topics or having a guest on. So as time goes on, I'm going to be adding more benefits to the other tiers, the higher tiers. And I'm really excited about some of them, but I wanted to start small to not overpromise. But I would really love your support, because beyond that, you're helping make this, get out there. And if you can share this with friends, rate it, write a review, would really, really appreciate it. And there's going to be more ways of getting involved as we go forward. And so please subscribe, again, wherever you are listening. Send it to a friend. Let them know, hey, this is going to be a really cool adventure, and you never know what Josh is going to say, because that's the reality. Do we ever know what Josh is going to say? I don't know half the time, but I really can't wait for this journey. I've been thinking so much about wow, if I had known in my other podcasting journeys what it would be like coming up, to now. It would be so crazy. I never thought I would be here back when I started podcasting, and now here we are. So I just wonder what the next 6, 8, 10 years is going to be like, because I'm really excited about what's to come. And so be listening. I think we'll probably, I haven't figured out yet if episodes will be bi-weekly or monthly. Like I said, I'm really trying not to overpromise on things. So you might be getting a new episode in 2 weeks, but I'm not going to hold to that 100%. I am asking for deep grace, like just profound grace, because starting a practice and all these things, it's a lot of different things that are happening. And I think it'll take me a moment to really get the routine down. So I want to say that I will be putting out an episode every 2 weeks. If you don't see it come out in 2 weeks, then, don't hate me. But I am really honored that you would listen to this full 30 minutes of me talking. Again, this is like a whole new experience that I've never done before. It's easy for me to talk, but it feels weird sometimes talking into a microphone. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great July, 4th of July, all the things that are coming. And if I don't speak with you in 2 weeks, you will definitely be getting an episode within the month. Thank you for joining me today on Holy Ourselves. May you go into this week remembering that you are seen, loved, and invited to live from a place of wholeness, just as you are. No need to change in this moment to be any more loved. And until next time, keep becoming.